Yeah, so these are the things that the Lord's highlighted for me in terms of defining kingdom justice. These are things out of Scripture the Lord's really shown for me. And again, they're the kind of the bedrocks for me in my journey of following Jesus. Just again, as a Jesus follower, saying yes to the things that He's putting in front of me to say yes to. And for me, I've always recognized, again, I mentioned in a previous video, like that the journey of justice has always led me into something that's holistic. But in discovering holistic, I've discovered the centrality of God's heart for the poor in the Gospels, in Scripture, and I just recognize at such a clear level that if I want to be with God, I need to be where He's at. And where He's at, Isaiah 57:15, it's one of those scriptures, it's like a bedrock for me. You know, behold, the high and lofty one who lives in a high and lofty place, who dwells among those with a broken and contrite spirit to revive them. So I'm in prayer in an earlier season of life, like just again, seeking intimacy, looking to be close to God. I love Him. I want Him. There's nothing else for me but Him. And when I'm in that space of real desperation, real prayer, He's like, Isaiah 57:15, Lance, if you want to be with me, then be where I am. And where I am is with those who have a contrite spirit, with those who are broken in spirit. And then He actually whispered into my spirit the name of a kid that I was mentoring at the time. And this kid, his parents, he didn't have his father in his life. His father was actually incarcerated. So single mom raising this kid. And I'm just doing the youth pastor thing at the time, pouring into this kid. I love on the kid. I strengthen him. I encourage him. But the Father of the Lord was so clear to me, if you want to be with me, then be with Him. And I just, this journey, this unfolding of seeing that there's no separation between God and man. Like He's consistently seeking out that which was lost. Like He's always coming for the one that's left. Like He's always focused on, are there people in need in culture? Is there a space of human suffering? I want to be there as the Father, as the Lord. He's like, I'm showing up. Proverbs 19:17 is another like real clear highlight the Lord just burned in my spirit in those early days, that he who lends to the poor lends to the Lord. And just like stopping and thinking about that idea, to me, I was just so confrontive of my own Western spirituality, where I've like seen God as all-encompassed, all-powerful, all-perfect, has need of nothing. And in that proverb is so clear, like He has need, and His need is connected to the needs of humanity. Where there's human suffering, He actually wants to show up and bring shift. And when I invest my strength towards those who are suffering or those who are in a state of poverty, I actually invest in His own need. Like I'm actually ministering to His heart. And I love in Luke 6, Jesus addressing His disciples, Sermon on the Mount, and it says Jesus, looking at His disciples, began to teach. So he's setting priorities for His disciples, and He tells them, blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom. And that word poor in the Greek, it's literally, you transliterate that word into, I know there's so many definitions, but one of the clear ideas of poor is somebody who's fallen on hard times. I know in the West, like we like to compartmentalize the poor are these people on this street corner doing this particular activity. No, the poor are those who have fallen on hard times. So who are the poor? That becomes the big question. I love, for me, this leaders in this space, as I'm paying attention to what God's showing me in Scripture. I'm trying to follow the Lord as He's leading. But I'm a reader. I love film. I love literature. And I remember stumbling on this quote by Emerson. And Emerson said this, that great men and great nations are not boasters or buffoons, meaning not people that are just in the circus and kind of like overly going about their business to just enjoy themselves and be so focused on their own needs. But they are those who are the perceivers of the terrors of humanity. And they are those that have manned themselves to face those terrors. So this big idea that great people, great nations are those that recognize where there's injustice in the earth, like they see human suffering and they've manned themselves to face that particular terror. And you see, again, in other portions of Scripture, you see Psalm 82, like it's just a clear depiction of, again, a priority from heaven. It's like the focus of God is in this space. And He says, verse 1 of Psalm 82, God presides in this great assembly. He gives judgment among the gods, lowercase g gods, which again, that Hebrew word gods, it can be translated out into meaning a delegated authority, a ruler, somebody who has authority in the earth. And he charges them. He says, how long are you going to defend the unjust? How long will you show partiality to the wicked? And then he stops, pause, Selah. Verse 3, defend the cause of the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the rights of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. So God in the heavens, in the great assembly, he says, here's the focus. The focus is to show up for the weak. And literally these ideas, they're vindicate. Like I'm going to vindicate, I'm going to console, I'm going to defend, I'm going to rescue, whatever it looks like that's wrapping around the poor, whatever it is that's afflicting the fatherless, whatever it is that the needy are suffering from, there's a clear call as delegated authority to be active in that space. Again, lend to the poor, you lend to the Lord. The one who lives in a high and a lofty place, like he actually lives to raise up the spirit of the contrite, to actually minister to the broken or the heart of the broken. And I love how this psalm progresses, where he says, he makes a statement, they know nothing, they understand nothing, they walk about in darkness, all the foundations of the earth are shaken. It's that Emerson quote, like where there is suffering in the earth is off kilter. Like when we see human need, that actually is creating problems in the planet. And God's saying, the foundations of the earth are shaken when my delegated authority is not acting on behalf of those who are suffering. And then he kind of finishes this psalm with this very big idea. Again, I said, you are gods, lowercase g. You are all sons of the Most High. So he defines gods, lowercase g. You're sons of the Most High. You're sons, you're daughters of the Most High. Like as somebody who's been born of heaven, who's connected to the Father, who is a born-again follower of Jesus, we are those lowercase g gods. We are delegated authority. And we're in that delegated authority space, we're called to right what's wrong in the earth. Kingdom justice is the centrality of the gospel, that Jesus rights wrongs in the earth. And we see this like as kingdom justice is unfolding for us, that revival doesn't lead just to more people going to church, but revival leads to reformation. Revival leads to social change. Revival gives birth, like the Wesley brothers preaching in the Second Great Awakening, gives birth to individuals who called themselves the Claphamites. People like William Wilberforce, who saw a social ail called the transatlantic slave trade, and they gave their entire life to eradicate that social ill. Like they gave their very existence, their time, their energy, their strengths, their talents, their education, their learning, everything was caught up in how do we abolish the transatlantic slave trade. Revival leads to reformation. And by reformation, I mean social and cultural change. Where there's human suffering, that shift and that change and that real healing taking place. I love what MLK says. When an individual sets out to build a temple in the earth, he must recognize that there is evil as a tension at the heart of the universe. So we recognize that there is injustice. We don't turn a blind eye to human suffering. We don't see the poor and say, wow, I hope they figure it out. We feel the call from heaven to be invested in such a way that compassion manifests. And when compassion manifests, there's change, there's healing, there's transformation. And we feel the responsibility, as Jesus did, to right wrongs on the earth. Like this is the idea of kingdom justice. Kingdom justice is showing up. Kingdom justice is investing ourselves with transformational energy, healing energy. And at the end of the day, there is a proverb that can define all this for us. Like, rescue those that are being led away to the slaughter. Proverbs 24, verse 11. And I love how verse 12 finishes. But if you say, we knew nothing about this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who guards your life know it? And will he not repay each person according to what he's done? And so there is an accountability that every one of us should feel in some measure. When we recognize injustice, when we see people in need, how are we responding? We know Jesus set the example. He responded. Like he didn't run from the bully, like he inserted himself into those situations of human need, and he brought strength. How would we bring strength? How could we show up in ways that make a difference? And to me, kingdom justice has so much to do with recognizing the need in my generation and taking a personal responsibility to be invested in that space. And in that space in a way that brings strength, brings hope, brings healing, is representative of a loving, compassionate Father, is representative of a God who presides in the great assembly and is saying, hey, defend the cause of the weak, show up on behalf of the fatherless, rescue those who are weak and needy. And at the end of the day, this is a pretty clear mandate. It's central to being a follower of Jesus. So we're not staying in the church, we're not hiding in the church, we're not overly concerned with personal growth and development. Our personal growth and development has everything to do with how we become invested in cultural well-being. It has everything to do with how we can be tooled up and skilled up to go out into social landscape and bring strength. So to me, this is such an inspiring idea, this idea of what kingdom justice is, and it's all throughout Scripture.